Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. To the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish communities, I challenge you all to a debate. The debate is on the nature of the Messiah and whether it is fair for people to claim to be forgiven after my flesh dies. For those of you who have been watching some of my other videos, you know that for many years now, I've been claiming to be God's true representative, and for the last maybe 3 or so, I have claimed to be the idea that Christ returning is superimposed on as the top martial artist, as Christ is said to be waging war with mind, body, soul, and spirit. These are martial art concepts, and there's nothing in there talking about what happens to the top martial artist ever possible. So Christ is therefore obviously superimposed on the top martial artist ever. Now, listen carefully to my points. Point number one, the Bible does not cover the ancient and moral royal black African martial artists, so it is written in a way that is fraudulent. In Isaiah 28:17, it even says to make righteousness and justice the plumb line and the measuring line. So why aren't these obviously moral people in the Bible? Okay, now some of you say, well, how do we know they're moral? Well, the Bible says you know a tree by its fruit. Okay, you know that there's Mandela and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Okay, these black people, with all due respect to all the races, they go beyond the other groups of people, we'll say, when it comes to insisting on what is moral and right. We see that the white colonists, okay, they owned slaves, and white people praised them up and down. And white people are very hesitant as a group. I know there's some exceptions, I'm part white. They're very hesitant to put Martin Luther King above the founding fathers and the people of European descent in American history. Okay? They have the same attitude with their churches. They have the same attitude when dating, and that attitude is very telling. It's exactly what you'd expect a neocolonial oppressor to do, is to get the attractive women and to try to get other races to get the unattractive women and say, hey, we're all mixing together and everything's fair. That's the general rule of thumb. And you can't point to a few celebrities or a few rich black people and say that I'm magically incorrect. So again, the Bible does not cover the ancient moral royal black African martial artists, so it is written in a way that is fraudulent. Just like the various groups in Egypt were jealous of the falcon martial artists in Egypt, to where eventually they would claim to be the true representatives of Horus. Point number two, it zooms in on the people who are presenting the story and not other people. You see, 1 in 10 Roman Christians or so were said to be Jews. That's a lot. Did I say Roman Christians? Roman citizens. 1 in 10 Roman citizens are said to be Jews. That's a lot of Jews who were in Rome. And as you can imagine, as they do wield a lot of power today, they almost certainly wielded a lot of power back then. So we see that the same whites, Jews, and LGBT people, these kind of people who don't emphasize being a warrior, they're kind of less masculine-like, they're the ones who are giving you the narrative of the story. They're the ones who compiled the Bible after the Council of Nicaea. They got all the manuscripts together, and they used the Nicene Creed to determine which books would go into the Bible. These were people who were certainly not authorized by God. They were authorized by the government. The Roman government allowed it because there was a lot of powerful, corrupt Roman senators and cult leaders, okay, who wanted Christians to be on the same page and to worship the emperor. Even in the Bible itself, it says that most people are on the broad path to destruction, and few people find the narrow path. Why is that? It's because the government authorized the compiling of the Bible, and evil people are the ones who built the churches. If you have a viable counter-argument, please state it. Point number three, there is a Martin Luther King Day and not a white or Jewish or LGBT day that is comparable. And again, I'm not racist. I'm part black, part white. My dad's from Nigeria. My mom's white. They met in Michigan, when it was very racist, there's a lot of race riots, and they ended up getting married anyway. That's how much it's in my genes to not be racist. In the midst of racial strife, okay, they ended up getting married anyway. And, the whites in the area were so racist that they pressured my mom to drop out of medical school, but eventually she would finish it anyway. Excuse me. Eventually she finished medical school anyway, and she's a doctor nonetheless. Both my parents are doctors. In fact, and it's Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'm from the royal family, okay, the one that's truly spiritual, because there's various royal families, but the one that is widely known to be the most spiritual, for Martin Luther King's tribe, the Igbos. Okay. Point number 4. I am not racist, but whites, Jews, and LGBT people colonized the world, and they raped, exploited, and murdered out of sheer greed. Regardless of whether or not you think that they are all evil as individuals, keep in mind, I maintain that my white mother is blameless. They are certainly ruled out as the trees where one would look for the Messiah, as their groups insisted to the extreme on being seen as important and in charge and chosen, etc. In Proverbs it says, do not exalt yourself in the presence of a king, and God is the King of kings. God is the King of the King of kings. So in other words, because white people and Jews and LGBT people insisted fanatically as they colonized the world that they be seen as superior, at the image of Jesus they present as white, and so on and so forth, okay, it ruled them out as the people that God would choose, because you have to put a lamp on its stand. It's not justice, right? It's, again, Isaiah 28:17, make righteousness and justice the plumb line and the measuring line. It's not justice to tell the colonized people of the world to look to the oppressor group that not only colonized them and stole their land and so on and so forth, but insisted every step of the way that people see them as superior. They even came up with scientific racism and the various philosophies. They even came up with eugenics and the various philosophies to try to get people to see them and their patriarchal lines as superior. Then they put phallic symbols, excuse my French, they're basically penis symbols, all over the world, right? In France, in DC, in London, what have you, to brag about what they would call sexual power. And one of the main philosophies here in America to this day is the idea of corporate sexual power, and they persecute anybody who argues that they're wrong about it. It's very, very sick rape by deception activity. All right, point number 5. Also, it is very suspicious, to say the least, to argue that Jesus willingly sacrificed his flesh specifically for his oppressors to be redeemed. Okay, it's one thing for him to sacrifice himself for those who are traveling with him and willing to die with him. It's another thing for the people who crucified him to then say they're the Holy Roman Empire and to spread Christianity throughout the world. And of course, Protestantism comes from Catholicism. Okay, the Catholics, Martin Luther, some 500 years ago or so, was part of the Catholic Church. Then he branched off and formed his own religion. And then these people went on about how the Catholics are a bad tree, but the Protestants are from that bad tree, and they have similar activities like the Ku Klux Klan and all these Trump fans, and on and on and on and on. Okay, I'm almost out of time. I could get more specific about that and explain how they're all guilty and the collective guilt, but that's a story for another day. I only have like a minute left. Okay, 6. One's colonizers cannot give them a book that says the colonial oppressor and their offspring are forgiven after hundreds of years of screening out the righteous and finally screening out me. So eventually I'm going to be dead. My flesh is going to be dead, rather. My soul is going to live on. Okay? But these people can't do that. They can't say they're forgiven after I said they're not forgiven, and I'm actually the Messiah, and my flesh dies. And if you didn't know that I was born, you should still know that their argument is bull. Okay? They even take the attractive females, okay, and they give some of them to token Judas minorities, which is exactly what you'd expect them to do, okay, and they even ordered attractive females to shun me, and they brainwashed them so much that they actually did, even though I'm the top martial artist ever, and the son of 2 doctors, won a brain surgeon. That's how outrageous as it gets, and I'm in California, the most populated state, one of the most populated countries in the world. Point number 7, consider generational ill-gotten gains, technology and its implications, cheating and its implications, and controlled breeding, media influence, social media, okay, various groups that control breeding and otherwise. Thank you.